Hello everyone, and thanks for joining today's webinar on DocLib Expense. This is reaching a global audience, and some of you may be having your morning coffee or tea, and others in the audience are well into the evening hours. My name is Dave Stevens, and I'm Vice President of Sales for PIX. DocLib Expense is an easy-to-use desktop or mobile solution, and it was created to automate workflow from receipt to reimbursement. This is a great solution and offers another way to extend your company's capabilities of your QAD implementation, and is designed to enhance and replace your current paper-based mobile expense systems and automate processes. In our agenda today, I wanted to offer a brief highlight and overview of who is PIX and our solutions. We will then review the expense solution, followed by a brief demo showing how you can use the solution in either the mobile or desktop applications. Also joining us today is Rich Rosenthal, a product manager, who's going to show us how DocLib Expense can be used. PIX was established in 1995, so we're about 20 years old, and we were one of the first QAD Alliance partners. PIX developed DocLib for QAD users, offering seamless integration with QAD's enterprise applications. In 2009, DocLib was selected as a complementary solution for QAD enterprise applications, and we continue to invest in our applications. DocLib 5.0 is a 100% web interface with DocAlpha intelligent document capture and QAD's QExtend QXI transaction automation engine. In May of 2005, we released DocLib Expense at QA's Explore conference. What you're seeing on this screen here is a screenshot of what DocLib Expense would look like on your mobile application. And whether you're using a iOS or Android platform, we work on either platform. In the demo today, we will show you how you can use your phone to create and submit your expense report. Also, you'll notice that while using the mobile application, you'll see that it auto-fills in some information for you, and you'll fill in some of the rest. On this screen here, what we're showing while using the mobile solution is that there are some configurable screens that you can define expense types or codes. And then once submitted, the expense report is routed for approvals. On this screenshot, what we're showing is that the mobile solution works with either QExtend in the SE version, or it works with the Financials API if you happen to be using the EE solution. Approved expenses are automatically entered into QAD for payment as a voucher or supplier invoice, and then you'll see that the document is stored in the expense report along with the image of the receipt. What we're showing on this screen here, it's a view of DocLib Expense desktop application, which is running in your web browser. This works the same as the mobile solution, but when you're working obviously on a desktop, you may have access to a scanner and you can scan images in that way as well. So in summary, whether you choose to use the mobile tool or the desktop application, either tool can be used for the entire expense report process, whether that's from creating the expense report or submitting the expense report, and or you can then receive the expense report approval process. Wanted to address a little bit of some return on investment here. So it turns out that when employees are scanning receipts for expenses, that happens to be one of the two most popular choices that the finance department looks to automate from paper-free transactions. According to the Aberdeen Group, processing a single expense report costs an average user $20.65 when it's not automated. When you choose to automate, which is what we're looking at here today using DocLib Expense, that cost plummets to an average of $8.33, or for a savings of $12 for each single report. At this point, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Rich Rosenthal, and he'll show a brief demo of DocLib Expense on both the mobile application and some desktop.
Thanks, Dave, and thanks again, everybody, for joining our webinar today. As David mentioned, my goal here today is actually to give you a live demo of DocLib Expense for both the mobile application as well as our desktop application. On my demo today, I'm going to be actually creating a voucher in QAD Standard Edition or SE version. However, I do know that we have users who are our customers who are on this webinar today who are EE users or Enterprise Edition. I don't want you to get concerned about that fact because we are actually integrated to EE as well as SE. My goal, as I said, is to create a new expense report. I'm going to use the mobile app and show you how that is done in a couple of different ways by our mobile application. From there, I'll actually switch over to the desktop application, add an additional line to our expense reports, submit that for approval, and we'll watch it go through the entire approval process and the creation of the voucher within QAD. So let me go ahead and log on. And what we'll see here is the first or the main DocLib screen for the mobile application. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select create a new expense report via this selection here. This is the first screen to actually create a new expense report. And one thing that I will note is that each one of these fields are configurable for our customers and in turn our customers' users. For example, the two dates that we see here are the actual effective date for this particular expense report with a default of 7 days starting with today. Your organization may not run expense reports like that, and you may want to just have your employees submit expenses for each day, for example, or an effective date for an expense report may not be relevant to you. If that's the case, we can easily turn off those prompts and not have that as part of the actual interface. We will also see, as I get further on into the demo, certain fields are going to automatically default for a specific user. Those fields can actually be turned on and off if needed for if that doesn't pertain to you and your particular implementation. So let me go ahead and I'm going to create a new expense report. My first prompt here, I'm going to leave the effective date range the same as it's defaulted to, but I'm going to select a company. Now the company, the way to think of the company within DocLib Expense is just think of it in terms of QAD domains. If you're a single domain QAD user, this prompt wouldn't make a lot of sense. Therefore, we would actually take it away and configure it so it wouldn't even be prompted for when you're generating an expense report. But if you have employees who are actually doing expense reports for different domains that are within your QAD system, we would prompt them for that, and that would pertain to which domain to create the transaction against. Next up, I'm going to enter a purpose. This is the purpose for this particular expense report. It is a required field. I'm not allowed to create an expense report unless there is a purpose. So I'm going to say for our demo today, I will say this is a customer lunch and supplies. Go ahead and click done, click submit, and it'll take me to the line item screen. So it's prompting me to actually enter specific line items. I'm going to select this first, my first choice here, which is the expense type, and I'm going to see a whole list of user-defined expense types. The way to think of these is these expense types actually equate to QAD general ledger accounts. So your users, your expense report users, don't have to remember or know what GL accounts to assign a specific expense to. They're just going to be selecting the actual expense type, which is defined within the DocLib setup. So I'm going to say this is a lunch. The next prompt here, this is the date of the expense. These next two prompts are actually the cost center and sub-account for this particular user. And if you note, it's actually defaulted to a specific value. That again is done via the DocLib expense setup. And if it is not even something that you want users to maintain, we can again take that away from the screen. But I'm going to go ahead and leave that as home unit sales for my cost center and site 100 for my sub account. And I'm going to go ahead and just enter an expense amount. I'm going to make the expense reimbursable and give it some notes. Notes are specific to this expense line. They further describe what this expense line is, and it is a required field. So I'll just say this is a lunch with Joe. Next up, I need to take an image of my receipt. So I have my receipt here. I'm going to click the Take Picture icon. Activates my, my camera in my phone. Select a receipt. Select Use Photo. And DocLib Expense responds with the changes are saved. So that's one way to actually generate expense lines via the mobile application. But if your users are road warriors and they're doing many expense lines each and every day as they incur them, it may not be the most efficient way to actually generate an expense line. Selecting the expense report, selecting the type, selecting the date, entering the amount, taking the picture, that does take a certain amount of time. And we've actually even streamlined this a little further. So once we have a current expense report, such as the one that I just created, users can then, just by a single click, take an image of a receipt, assign it to an expense type, and off they go. This is done by actually selecting this camera icon at the bottom of the screen, which I'll do right now, which activates the phone. I see the second receipt here. I'll take an image of it, click Use Photo, and notice it first off tells me the image is captured correctly, so all that went well. And then I'm presented with a list of expense types. These are the same expense types that we saw from the previous screen. I'm going to select Supplies. I'll give it an amount. Click Done, click OK. Actually, I did the amount wrong, so click Done, click OK. DocLib responds with the changes saves. So you can see that process of actually generating the expense report was much more streamlined and would be, in my opinion, used by expense users much more frequently than actually going through each and every line item. So we have an expense report that's already created. We have 2 line items for it. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch over to the DocLib desktop application and add an additional line and finish processing my expense report from the desktop app. So as David had mentioned, the DocLib desktop app is 100% browser-based. There's no need for any software any local software on your machine to be installed. Everything's run within a browser. I'm going to go ahead and log in as the same user as we did for the desktop application. I'm sorry, the mobile application. And I'll select my workflow and I should see my expense report. There it is. I'll select it. Let me just collapse that frame so we can see a little better. And what we'll see here is actually the 2 line items that I had added via the desktop app, my lunch and my supplies. Going left to right here, we see all the fields that were set as we went through and actually added the line item. If I hover over this link here, I can see the actual images of the receipt documents that I've created. So everything was done and uploaded over into the DocLib database. What I'm going to do next here is I'm going to add a row. I'm going to add a third expense line item for it. So I'll click Add Row. Then I'm going to just go left to right and actually select my expense type. To add a file or a receipt via the desktop app, I'll just click this icon, which is going to fire another screen where I could either scan. If I had a scanner connected to my computer, I could actually put my receipt on the scanner, click Scan, then it'll upload an image of that receipt, and I could utilize that. Or I can select an existing file that's on my desktop. Seeing that we're doing this via webinar and you couldn't see my scanner even if I had one connected, I'm just going to go ahead and just click Select Files. So I'll select one of my receipt files, click Done, closes the tab, and that image is uploaded. Continuing on, left to right, I'll select a date for my for this expense line. I'm going to go ahead and select the cost center and sub-account, and if you notice, you see a range that actually comes from my QAD system of the range of cost centers and sub-accounts that pertain to my particular implementation. I'll go ahead and give this an amount, $24.04, we'll say, and assign it some notes. This would be dinner with Sally. As with the mobile app, the notes or comments are a required field. I wouldn't be able to submit this expense report for approval unless I actually added those notes. I'll go ahead and say this is reimbursable as well. Everything looks good. I'm ready to submit for approval, so I'll select Submit for Approval and Submit. Now, what's actually occurring here, and David touched on during the presentation, DocLib and DocLib Expense has a workflow module that's part of the overall solution. With that workflow module, you can create a business process, an automated business process, where documents such as expense reports are routed through certain events, including approvals or the creation of transactions that are all defined by you. So that's actually occurring as we go through. As I actually submitted it, the expense report has been submitted to DocLib workflow for processing. Let's take a look and just view what's actually going on. I'm going to expand the frame a little bit and actually take a look at the workflow status. Now, the workflow status for everybody here that's on this webinar today is a QAD user. Therefore, you should be familiar with like QAD's transaction history. Think of DocLib's workflow history very similar to QAD's transaction history. Anything that happens to this particular expense report is going to be tracked and available to you to view for this particular expense report. As the lines are entered, as it's submitted for approval, as the approval emails are sent, all of that is tracked. So we can see here that a web approval email was sent to rjr@pix.com. That's actually my personal email address, and I have set up for our demo today a very simple approval matrix for this webinar, where any expense report from this user ID called Pix is submitted to me for actual approval. We can get as much more detailed than that if need be, based off of threshold amounts or expense types or what have you. We can have a very complex approval matrix based off of specific business rules, or have something very simple as I have for our demo here today. So the web approval email has been sent. I see it's actually come in. Let me double click on this so we can see this. Now this is the actual email that DocLib had sent to me to actually do the approval. If you note here in the body of the email, it says an expense report for Pix, which is the actual workflow or the expense user who had submitted it. Had submitted an expense report for the purpose of it, and it's prompting me to review and approve. Now notice that the expense report or receipts are not attached to the email. What we're sending is the actual website link or a web link for the approver to actually do the approval. So let me go ahead and click this link, and you'll see it's going to open up in a new frame, and I'm going to see the detail. I see the detail of the 3 expense types that I entered: the dinner, lunch, and supplies, the amounts there. Notice that all the supporting documents are linked with it, so if I wanted to view the receipts as I went through, I can just simply click on them and they appear in the top frame. There's the lunch receipt, there's the supplies receipt, and there's the dinner receipt. So all of those are all combined and available to you, via a single click as an approver. Coming back to the workflow document, I'm just going to give it some notes here. Say this is okay to pay. I'm going to click Approve, click Submit, and off it goes. So what's occurring now is the expense report is now moved to the next node in the process. And as I had mentioned with DocLib's workflow module, there is a background process that's going through the entire database, and it's moving the documents from one node to a next. While we're waiting, let's go ahead and just take a look at the sample workflow that I've created for us today. And we can do that by actually clicking this icon that appears in the workflow history. And we're going to see an image of going left to right of the actual flow of the expense report. Now, this is a pretty basic workflow. It may work for your organization. You may want to add some level of complexity. Keep in mind that with DocLib workflow, you can add as many nodes that you want. Our implementers can work with you to develop a business process that you want your expense reports to follow, and we can implement that, and you would have that structured process each and every time. But just taking a look at actually what occurred, we can see here in the leftmost node here, the expense lines were entered. They were entered from both the mobile application as well as the desktop application. It was approved by the user. It was checked to make sure it was ready for approval. And we went through and actually obtained the approval matrix. So the user ID RJR, myself, was actually obtained from the setup files that are within DocLib expense. That was found, the approval email was sent, and I made the decision as the approver to either approve or reject the expense report. If I chose to reject it, an email would have been generated to the expense user telling them that the rejection had taken place and the reason why, and it would be submitted back to that user for them to make the changes, add lines, delete lines, what have you, whatever the reason, and to resubmit. If the approver approved the expense report, which is what I did, it will then be submitted over to QAD. Again, we're using QAD SE for this demonstration to actually create the voucher for the expense report. Once that is complete, all the documents, including the expense report and the receipts, are saved to the database, and users can view that after the fact. So let me go ahead and close this down. And let's take a look at our workflow status again. This should be completed by now, and we can see that it is. Looking at my workflow status, everything's green. That means it went through the entire process without an issue. And looking at my workflow history, I can see the very last step is a file was added to DocLib. Now, I configured my document type for expense reports where the actual voucher number would be the file name for the expense report as it was added into the database. So in taking a look at just knowing that, the voucher number that was created was 1345. So let's switch gears here, and we'll switch over to QAD. And let's take a look at that voucher number 1345. So I'm going to take a look at the voucher inquiry, the standard QAD voucher inquiry. Voucher number 1345. Take a look there. We see our three line items, our lunch with Joe, our dinner with Sally, and the supplies, $325. So using QAD's QExtend functionality, we created the voucher for this particular employee. Now, as David mentioned in the presentation, DocLib and DocLib's expense was specifically designed for QAD. And with that, you've already seen the level of integration that we have as far as the setup data, as far as the creation of the transactions, et cetera. But we've actually taken the integration even a step further, where DocLib can be run from within the QAD's .NET UI interface itself. And let me show you how that actually works. Instead of running the voucher inquiry, I'm going to run the standard QAD AP voucher browse. And it's prompting me for my voucher number, again, 1345 as the starting voucher number. And we see the output. There's our three line items again, our lunch, dinner, and supplies, displayed on my screen. Now, where the integration with DocLib comes in is I can actually right-click on one of these fields, specifically the voucher number field, and I can execute a DocLib web search from within the same browse screen. So it's actually connected to DocLib. It did a search and it found that expense report that pertains to that particular voucher. If I click my workflow icon here, I can then see my workflow history, the same workflow history that we were reviewing as we watched the expense report go through the process. If I expand out the expense report itself, here I can see my supporting documents. There's my receipts. My three receipts. I can take a look at the dynamic data, which again just shows me some the details that actually DocLib said as it went through. All of that is available for you from within the QAD interface. Therefore, not your users, AP users, don't need to log into another system. They can do all of their searches from within the QAD interface itself. So that concludes the demo portion of our webinar today. I'm going to turn the presentation back over to Dave Stevens just to wrap things up. Again, I appreciate everybody's attention and hopefully talk to you soon.
Okay, Rich, wonderful. Thanks for the demo. In conclusion of today's webinar, let me just get to the last screen here, which is my direct contact information. I wanted to thank everyone again for joining us today, and I look forward to receiving additional questions that you may have. So certainly feel free to call me directly by phone or reach out to me via email, and we look forward to answering any questions that you may have regarding DocLib Expense. Thank you so much.